Imagine a quiet farm girl making a Harvard professor fall silent after just 17 moves. The skies over Pecos, Texas were dry and gentle that morning. In the back of an old pickup truck, burlap sacks of heirloom corn were strapped tightly. 9-year-old Emily Grace Walker wore a wide straw hat that shaded half her face. She sat quietly, arms wrapped around a worn-out composition notebook. They were on their way to Harvard, where people wore leather watch bands, white shoes, and said long words that meant even longer things. "You're not going inside, Em," Grandpa Will repeated. "Just wait in the truck." But Emily knew these meetings always ran long. She wandered around the campus until she came across a red brick building with bronze letters, Lamont Library. She'd never seen so many books in one place. The reading room was hushed. The tick of the old clock above echoed like a promise from the past. At the center of the room, beneath a shaft of soft morning light, sat a carved ebony chessboard. The white pieces gleamed like sunlight, the black ones like midnight. They stood still, as if waiting. Emily stepped closer, not daring to sit, just looking. Her wide eyes drank in every detail. She looked like someone who had crossed a desert and found a river. "You know how the night moves?" A voice behind her, gentle but clear. Professor William Alden was standing nearby, a thick logic textbook under his arm. His gray-blue eyes were quiet storm clouds. He was a veteran of strategic theory, the author of multiple textbooks still used in advanced logic courses. Emily hesitated. "I think it moves in an L shape." Alden smiled lightly. "That's correct. Would you like to play? Just for fun." A few minutes later, Emily made the first move, E4. A classic opening. Professor Alden raised an eyebrow, a farm child recalling E4. By the 20th move, it looked like a match between two trained competitors. Emily squinted at the board, clearly visualizing multiple responses. She used a subtle bishop-rook combination to bait a reaction, then countered with a clean knight pivot. Move 17. Emily advanced her queen, capturing central control. Professor Alden laced his fingers and leaned back. He didn't move again. There was a heavy silence. "You know the name of this opening?" he finally asked. "Rai Lopez," Emily said softly. "Mama read it to me when I had the fever." Alden didn't reply. He just stared at her, like he was seeing a face he hadn't seen in years. And one question would not leave him alone. Who planted this mind in the middle of a dust field? She didn't just move the pieces. She heard what they were thinking. The next day, Professor Alden canceled 2 meetings and walked across the Harvard yard with something heavy in his chest. He kept replaying the 17 moves. A girl from Pecos, who claimed she'd only learned chess from her mother's stories, had outplayed him in open development. The Ruy Lopez wasn't beginner's luck. It was memorized, studied, understood. He returned to Lamont Library before noon, and there she was again. Emily Grace Walker, seated cross-legged on the floor this time, a tattered paperback resting open in her lap. She was reading a book on geometry, upside down. "You're back," he said. Emily looked up, blinking. "I thought it'd be okay. No one told me to leave." "You're always welcome here." Alden paused. "Do you want a rematch?" She smiled. "Only if we use the same board." They sat down across from each other. This time Alden opened with D4, Queen's pawn opening. Solid, defensive, measured. Emily mirrored him. D5. As they played, Alden studied her, not the board. Her brow would furrow only briefly before she placed each piece. She never took notes. Her hands were still. Her eyes were everywhere. On move 9, she pushed her knight forward to a fianchetto position. Alden almost laughed. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. "I didn't learn it. It just looked right." And somehow it was. By move 21, Emily had cornered his bishop using a diagonal squeeze that required forecasting 4 moves ahead. She had also protected her queen's side without ever castling. Every move was fluid, purposeful. Alden made a bold gambit, sacrificing a knight. Emily didn't flinch. "Your knight was never meant to protect the center," she said calmly. "It wanted to jump to h5, but the rook stopped it." Alden froze. "That's not just intuition," he murmured. "That's spatial memory. Do you play blindfolded?" "I close my eyes sometimes when Mama tells me stories," she said. "I can see the whole board then." Alden couldn't hide his amazement. The match ended in a draw, barely. But Alden felt like he'd lost something else. The right to dismiss what he'd seen yesterday as a fluke. "Can I ask," he said softly, "what kind of school you go to?" "St. Agnes Elementary. It's got a leaky roof and no chess club. But Miss Deely lets me sit in the back and read while she teaches phonics." "And you've never played in a tournament?" "I've never seen one." Alden nodded slowly, mind already spinning. He sent her home with a book, My 60 Memorable Games by Bobby Fischer. "I can't read cursive very well," she warned. "Then just study the diagrams," Alden said. "They'll talk to you." That night, Emily sat on the porch beside Grandpa Will. He was shelling corn into a rusted bucket while she stared at the sky. "Did Mama like chess?" she asked. Will stopped. "She loved it. Said it made her feel like she could control something. Not many things in life give you that. She used to call the knight her favorite." Will smiled faintly. "She said it moved different from everyone else. That's how she felt too." The next day, Emily returned to the library. This time she brought her own notebook. On the first page, she had drawn a perfect 8-8 board by hand. Alden watched her copy openings from memory. The King's Indian Defense, the Sicilian Najdorf. She reversed them to see how they'd function if Black played first. "You're mapping the board like a language," he noted. "Isn't it one?" she asked. He gave her a small test, a series of puzzles from the Soviet-era grandmasters, endgames, famous traps, mating nets. She solved 6 out of 7. On the final one, a queen sacrifice designed to force zugzwang, she paused. "I think it's a trick," she said. "If the king takes the queen, the bishop mates. But I wouldn't move the queen yet. I'd wait until the king is forced left." She was right. Alden looked at her the way a botanist might regard a flower blooming in stone. By the time Grandpa Will came to pick her up, Alden had written a letter to the dean. 2. Dean Samuel L. Myers. Re. Emily Grace Walker. Independent Research Proposal. Dear Dean, I am writing to request a provisional access pass for a visiting minor. While this may be unprecedented, I believe Miss Walker's mind is of exceptional interest to the university. Her natural cognition in spatial reasoning and game theory appears to rival that of advanced undergraduate candidates. That night, Alden sat at his desk reviewing footage from the library's security cameras, just to confirm he hadn't imagined anything. Every move, every calculation, precise, timed, instinctive. And in Emily's eyes, no fear, just focus. And something he hadn't seen in years. Joy. He called a colleague at MIT. "I need an external review," he said. "She's 9. "Is she coached?" "No, that's the point." At dawn, Emily's mother's old wooden chest creaked open. Grandpa Will found a letter inside, folded between a baby blanket and a yellowed newspaper clipping. It was from Clara Walker, written during her first and only semester at Harvard. If I ever have a daughter, I'll teach her to think like the knight, moving where no one expects, always protecting others even when it's not safe. If she plays chess, let her lose with grace and win with humility. He closed the lid and smiled. Maybe Clara had taught her after all. The girl played like someone he had once failed. Professor Alden stayed late that night, long after Emily had gone home to Pecos with her grandfather. Something in her phrasing, "Mama read it to me when I had the fever," refused to leave his mind. He returned to the university archives, a vault of digitized student records and scanned ID cards. He typed in the last name, Walker. Only one match. Clara June Walker. Admitted 2003. Harvard College, Department of Mathematics. GPA, 4.0 in her first semester. No subsequent enrollment. There was no graduation date. He clicked into her record. The ID photo showed a young woman with wide, tired eyes, auburn hair, soft jawline. Her features were familiar. They were Emily's, sharpened by youth. Alden leaned back in his chair, stunned. He knew her. Not well, but enough. Clara had taken his course in logic and the limits of formal proofs. She'd sat quietly in the back, never asked questions, turned in every assignment early. Her final paper had been on Gödel's incompleteness theorems, and it had startled him in its clarity. But he hadn't been kind. He remembered his red ink. Dozens of questions written in the margins. Too speculative. Where is your formal proof? Unsupported analogy. He remembered returning her paper with a frown, saying she was chasing ghosts, not mathematics. She never returned to class after that. She had vanished. And now, 17 years later, her daughter was sitting across from him at the same school, playing chess the way Clara once solved proofs, with elegant, quiet, strange metaphor, and unstoppable instinct. The next day, Alden brought Emily a thermos of hot cocoa and a stack of logic puzzles. "Can I ask you something?" he said gently. Emily nodded, sipping the cocoa like it was the most exotic thing she'd ever tasted. "Where did you learn logic?" She didn't hesitate. "Mama, before she got too sick." "What kind of things did she teach you?" "She made me find patterns in the clouds, then in the pantry. We played something called If Not Then, like a game. She said it would help my brain get strong before my bones did." Alden chuckled. "That sounds like Clara." Emily looked up. "You knew her?" Alden hesitated. "A little. She was very smart, very brave." Emily smiled. "Mama didn't like talking about school. She said some places make you smaller instead of bigger." Alden felt that like a stone. "She was right," he said quietly. "Sometimes the people meant to teach us are the ones who don't understand us." Emily was tracing a pawn's shadow on the board. "She told me if I ever felt like a piece left behind, I should make my own board." Alden swallowed hard. "Emily," he said, "you're playing chess the way your mother used to write proofs." "She was good at this?" "She was better than I let her be." They sat in silence for a while. Alden finally said, "If it's okay with you, I'd like to tell you more about her." Emily nodded slowly. "Only if you also teach me how to castle properly. I keep forgetting which side is safer." And with that, they returned to the game. But Alden no longer saw a farm girl from Pecos across the table. He saw a second chance. What if a problem has no answer? Not because it's unsolvable, but because no one's asked the right question yet. By week 4, Alden had stopped labeling Emily. She wasn't just a prodigy, she was a question in motion. So he gave her something harder than chess, a problem no one had solved. They sat at a chalkboard. He wrote 7, 22, 68. Collat's conjecture, he said. Start with any number. Even? Divide by 2. Odd? Multiply by 3 and add 1. Repeat. They say it always ends at 1. He mapped it on the board. 7, 22, 11, 1. Emily tilted her head. No one knows why it ends? No one. She stared. It's like a song that always lands on the same note, no matter where it starts. He gave her chalk. She didn't solve it. But she began clustering the numbers, not by size, but by change. Odds, evens, when they stalled. Then she drew them as circles, spirals. What are you making? He asked. A shell, one that folds but never closes. Martin Kessler, a grad student, leaned in. That's fractal recursion. Emily added, some numbers fight longer. 27 loops far. 3 gives in fast. It's like holding breath before diving. Alden handed her another printout, a string of superprimes. Try this. She stared. Some of these try to pair but never get close, like lonely numbers. Later, he showed her a go board. She preferred the corners. Most people want the middle, she said. Corners feel safer, fewer directions to defend. You think like a tree, Alden said. I think like a bird, she replied. That night, Emily dreamed. A chessboard in the sky. Pieces were numbers. A knight moved not by rule, but rhythm. In the center, a symbol with no name. The next morning, she arrived early. On the chalkboard, she redrew Collat's, not as numbers, but as motion. Short paths curled tight. Long ones spun wide. You're mapping resistance, Alden said. No. How hard they try not to end. By noon, faculty filled the room. Chalkboards were covered. This is entropy in motion, Kessler whispered. What is this? Alden asked her. Emily answered softly, a dream waiting for the right question. At a closed seminar that afternoon, Alden presented her work. One professor muttered, metaphor isn't mathematics. Emily pointed to the spiral. I didn't solve it, she said, but I heard how it breathes. Silence, then slow applause. That evening on the library steps, Alden said, today wasn't a solution. It was an invitation. Emily nodded. Maybe the board isn't missing a piece, just the question. And Alden knew. She hadn't come to solve problems. She had come to reframe them. Some battles aren't played on boards, but behind closed doors with sharpened words. Emily's chalk spirals still glowed faint on the seminar board when the silence broke. A young professor, Dr. Marcus Ellery, newly tenured, known for his sharp suits and sharper critiques, stood from the back. I have a question, he said, voice like glass. Are we really investing university resources to let an unsupervised child doodle on our blackboards? Alden looked up slowly. She's not unsupervised. She's not enrolled either, Ellery countered. No transcript, no standardized scores, no birth certificate filed in any known database. I checked. Whispers rustled through the room. Emily stood very still. She's 9. Alden said tightly, and she sees patterns your graduate students miss. Even if that's true, Ellery pressed, we have standards, access protocols, academic liability. What if this girl misrepresents Harvard's work? What if someone challenges it legally? She's not here to publish, Alden said. She's here to learn. Ellery smirked. From you? A long silence followed. The next morning, Emily arrived early to the library as usual, but the guard at the entrance hesitated. I'm sorry, he said. There's been a temporary suspension of guest access. Orders from admin. She looked up at him, confused. Did I do something wrong? He couldn't meet her eyes. I don't know, kid. I just follow what's posted. Emily turned and walked back down the marble steps, notebook hugged tight to her chest. That evening, Alden called the dean. She's a guest, not an applicant. This is retaliation, not policy. Bill, the dean said gently, you've got half the department whispering about favoritism and undocumented minors. We just need to slow things down. Her work on Colots was original and unpublished, unverifiable, uncredentialed. She's 9, and Harvard is not an orphanage. Alden hung up without saying goodbye. The next day, Alden found Emily sitting on a bench near the science quad. She wasn't crying, just drawing on the back of a seed packet. He sat beside her. They're making it hard for you to come back for a while, he said. Emily nodded. I figured. I'm sorry. She looked up. Why? Because they're afraid of what you represent. What's that? That genius doesn't come with paperwork. She was quiet for a moment, then said, I don't know what paperwork is. Alden blinked. I just know the knight jumps in an L. Word spread. A girl who'd shown professors a new way to map entropy was banned from a building for lacking credentials. Some faculty whispered support. Others stayed silent. But one thing had changed. Emily Walker was no longer invisible, and the knight had already moved, to the edges, where no one saw her coming. They took her from the board, but not from the game. The dust in Pecos clung to everything, boots, fences, lungs. But Emily didn't mind. Back home, the ground made more sense than the rules of buildings and badges. She rose early again, just like before Harvard. Fed chickens, hauled buckets, planted seeds with her grandfather in the long rows behind the house. His hands were worn from seasons, but his eyes still watched the sky like it might speak. They didn't talk about the university. But each night, after dinner, Emily took her wooden stick and drew on the dirt outside their porch, an 8x8 square. She placed dry pebbles for pawns, snapped twigs for rooks, leaves for bishops. She still played, even if no one else sat across. Her grandfather watched from the steps. What are you playing tonight? King's Indian, reversed, she said. But I'm making the bishop rebel. He chuckled. Sounds about right. On the 5th evening home, Emily sat at the small kitchen table and pulled out a page from her notebook. She wrote with a pencil stub, slow and quiet. Dear Professor Alden, I'm not writing to ask to come back. I know the pieces they play with are not the ones on the board. But if you still believe chess is fair, then you remember who they take off the board first. Not the king, not the queen, the ones without names. She folded it carefully, placed it in an envelope, and tucked it into the outgoing mailbox near the fence. At Harvard, Alden found it 3 days later. He sat at his desk, reading it in the morning sun. When he reached the final sentence, he put down his pen. Then he closed the office door and cried. Back in Pecos, the wind howled that night. Emily lay awake watching moonlight dance on the window pane. She wasn't sad. Not really. Just quiet. In her mind, she saw a knight again, not lost, not exiled, just waiting in the far corner for the next move, the one no one expected. To understand a mind like hers, he had to touch the soil it rose from. Alden left Cambridge on a Tuesday. He packed no briefcase, brought no papers, just a duffel bag, a second-hand chess set, and the letter Emily had written, creased and soft from rereading. The same letter that had unstitched something deep inside him. It took 2 flights and a 3-hour bus ride to reach Pecos, Texas. He hadn't set foot on dry soil in decades. The bus doors opened to a hot wind and the faint scent of sunburned grain. The landscape looked like someone had whispered life into dust and left it unfinished. The bus stop wasn't much, just a bench and a bulletin board held up by rusted nails. Grandpa Will was already waiting. He wore a work shirt stained at the elbows and held a plastic jug of water like it was the most practical welcome. "Professor," Will said, nodding once. "Mr. Walker," Alden replied, gripping the man's calloused hand. They drove back in silence. Will's truck rattled over gravel like it was arguing with the road. Alden stared out the window at miles of flat land, cottonwoods bent by wind, and silos that looked like forgotten promises. He didn't expect to be welcomed, but that night, Will cleared a space in the corn barn. "Fresh sheets. Dust might disagree, but you'll get used to it." Alden nodded. "Thank you." He lay on a cot surrounded by sacks of seed, a rusted rake, and the earthy perfume of hay. Outside, the night hummed with insects and stars, and for the first time in years, he slept without dreams. Emily found him early the next morning, sitting on the back porch in his shirt sleeves, watching a beetle make its way across a wooden floorboard. He didn't notice her until she sat beside him. She didn't say hello. She placed a twig between them on the porch. "Your move," she said. He smiled and moved a pebble. They played without speaking, a game of knights and rooks crafted from bottle caps, twine, and husks. No board, no time limit, just instinct. Dust swirled between them like breath. When the game ended in a quiet draw, she broke an apple in half and offered him the larger piece. "Mama used to say real teachers don't talk first. They listen." Alden took the apple. "I'm listening now." He stayed a week, and in that week, Alden learned how to be slow. He shoveled feed for goats. He chased a chicken through rows of stalks while Emily laughed from the fence. He helped Will patch a broken water pipe and got blisters from twisting old metal in the sun. He also learned that silence could be generosity, not judgment. In the evenings, he and Emily sat in the dirt beneath a vast sky. They traced openings with their fingers in the soil, reimagining famous games with new endings. Emily never asked about Harvard. She never spoke of being barred from the library. But once, after a particularly long pause in their game, she asked, "Why do you think the night moves the way it does?" Alden considered. To surprise, "I think it moves that way so it can't be blocked by rules. Just like Mama." On the 4th day, Alden walked 2 miles to the town's post office. It was a tiny place with one window and a fan that didn't turn. He mailed 2 letters. The first was to the Registrar of Records for Reeves County, a request for delayed certification of birth. He included a notarized affidavit from Will and a photo of Clara holding a baby, Emily, beneath a pecan tree. The second letter, longer and heavier, he mailed to the Harvard Board of Academic Ethics. It read, 17 years ago, I failed a student. Her name was Clara Walker. She was brilliant, gentle, and too quiet for a system that rewards noise. I judged her not on her insight, but on her silence. I see now how deeply that hurt her, and what it cost all of us. Today, I have met her daughter. She is everything Clara was and more. I ask that her presence, past and future, be not only acknowledged, but honored. Sometimes brilliance does not enter through the front door. Sometimes it climbs through windows we never thought to open. He signed it. William Alden, student of a student. That evening, as the sun spilled gold over the field, Alden helped Emily harvest rows of corn. It wasn't symbolic. It was survival. She pointed to a small sprout. That one came up late. Will it catch up? Maybe, she said. Sometimes things bloom slower when they're busy building roots. Later, they returned to the porch. Emily pulled out the seed packet she'd written on weeks ago. She unfolded it and handed it to him. Want to see my new opening? She drew a pawn formation shaped like a spiral, soft, centered, unthreatening. It's not meant to win fast, she said. It's meant to last long. He studied the pattern, like a message hidden in plain sight. On Alden's last morning, Will poured him a mug of bitter coffee. You're not the first smart man to forget what ground smells like, he said. But you might be the first to come back and kneel in it. Alden nodded. I didn't come to fix her. I came to fix myself. Will looked toward the field. Then you've done enough. Emily appeared with a wooden stick. Come on, one last game. They walked out to the furrowed edge where dry soil waited like a blank page. Emily drew an 8x8 square. No clock, she said. No rush, he replied. They knelt across from each other. No pieces, just memory, just possibility. And side by side, they began. The game that would change both their lives. One quiet move at a time. She walked into the tournament like a question no one had prepared for. It had been 3 weeks since Alden returned to Cambridge, and 1 week since the Harvard Ethics Board issued a rare public letter apologizing to the Walker family. The apology didn't erase the pain, but it cleared the path. When the invitation to the Cambridge Junior Scholars Invitational arrived, Alden knew it was more than a tournament. It was a test, not of skill, but of how far people had really come. It invited middle school students from across Massachusetts to compete in mathematics, logic, and chess. Alden read the fine print 3 times before forwarding it to Pecos. Emily accepted in 5 words. If there's a night, I'll ride. She arrived in Massachusetts wearing a faded denim jacket, a sun-hardened dress, and rubber sandals. The other students wore polos and pressed slacks. Some had coaches. Some arrived in town cars. Emily arrived alone. In the first round, she was paired with a 7th grader from Brookline who had ranked in the state top 10. He barely looked up when she offered a handshake. You want white or black? He asked, unimpressed. Emily smiled. I like surprises. You choose. She won in 18 moves. The next 3 rounds were quiet storms. She dismantled opponents with moves that seemed naive at first glance, but bloomed into cunning traps. Her style was not aggressive. It was unshakable, as if the board whispered the right steps just in time. Between matches, she sat by herself under a maple tree outside the hall, sketching new openings in a small notebook made from seed packet paper. She refused all interviews, waved away photographers, and declined a ride from Alden, who stayed across the street, watching like a proud shadow. By the 4th round, murmurs spread. Who's the farm kid? She doesn't go to any of the prep schools. Did you see that night trap in round 2? The final round was held in the main hall of Cambridge Latin School, a room lined with dark oak and quiet expectations. It came down to 2 players, Emily Walker from Pecos, Texas, and Victor Langley, son of Harvard's chair of applied mathematics. He entered in a tailored blazer and sat with a practiced calm. His father stood in the back, arms crossed, jaw set like marble. Victor glanced at Emily's worn sandals and mismatched buttons. They let anyone in now, huh? Emily didn't flinch. Just the ones who know how the night moves. The arbiter started the clock. Victor opened with the Queen's Gambit, precise, cold, rehearsed. Emily responded with something unorthodox. She placed her knight early, not to control space, but to obscure it. Then again. Then again. By the 10th move, Victor began to squint. She had traded central power for motion. On move 14, she swapped her king's bishop and knight. Victor frowned. That's not a real opening. It is now, Emily whispered. She called it the knight's veil, a technique that created illusions of threat by rearranging spatial tension, using the L-shaped leaps to mask where her pressure truly lay. It didn't matter that Victor had memorized every grandmaster game since 1960. He hadn't studied her. Move 32, check. Move 33, check. Move 34, checkmate. Victor stared at the board like it had betrayed him. His father turned without a word and left the hall. Emily stood and offered her hand. Victor shook it, dazed. "You're not a mistake," he whispered. "No," she said. "I'm just new." That evening, Alden met her outside, where the steps caught the last warmth of the sun. He handed her a root beer. "I kept it cold." She grinned. "You remembered." He looked out over the quad. "They'll write about this. They won't spell Pecos right." "Does it matter?" Emily sipped her drink. "No. Long as they spell night with a capital K." He laughed, and beside the statue of Cicero, as the wind stirred fallen leaves, the girl who once drew chessboards in dirt sat beside the professor who once thought knowledge could only come from books. And together, they began planning the next move. If you ever see a queen retreat instead of advance, that may be the moment you understand. Victory was never the point. The letter arrived on a Wednesday morning, tied with twine and smelling faintly of lavender and dust. Emily found it slipped between pages of an old game theory book Alden had mailed from Harvard's archives. The envelope was thin, yellowed with time, and bore a name she had never seen: Clara Walker. Her mother. Emily sat on the front steps of the farmhouse with the letter in her lap for nearly an hour before opening it. The air was dry. A grasshopper clicked from the edge of the porch. She finally unfolded the paper. The handwriting was careful, almost shy. Every word pressed like it carried weight. "To my daughter, if you're reading this, it means you found more than I ever dared to hope. I wrote this before leaving Harvard. There are things I never had the courage to say aloud, things I hope you will one day understand on your own. But if I can help you skip even one night of doubt, then this is worth writing. You were always brilliant. Even as a baby, your eyes tracked patterns I couldn't see. I taught you chess because it was the only language I knew for a mind like yours. But I also taught you to cook, to mend, to listen, because intelligence without tenderness is just cold light. If you ever find yourself in a place of power, in a room where people look to you for answers, remember this: if one day you see a queen step backward instead of forward, that may be the moment you understand. Victory was never the point. The point was kindness. And you, my Emily, are the kindest genius I've ever known. Love you always, Mama." The paper trembled in her hands, not from wind, from something deeper. Emily folded the letter and held it against her chest. Her mind, so quick and sharp, went still. A week earlier she had received an invitation, embossed with gold lettering, to join the U.S. junior chess team for international competitions. She had made national headlines. She had sponsors lined up. She had a future paved in victory. And yet, that evening, as sunlit dust drifted through the kitchen window, she placed the unopened envelope from the national team next to the sink. Then she walked out back, where her grandfather was helping neighborhood kids build a scarecrow out of spare boots and dried sorghum. "Can I borrow the barn on Saturdays?" she asked. Will looked up from tying a rope arm. "For what?" "A class," she said. "For anyone who wants to learn. Chess, puzzles, reading. Doesn't matter if they're good, just if they're curious." He nodded. "You got chalk?" "I got ideas," she said. That Saturday, 5 kids came. By the next month, there were 15. She called it Pawn School. They learned how to hold a knight and how to say, "I don't know," without shame. They painted pawns with nail polish and made their own boards from seed sacks. One day, a boy asked, "What's better, to win or to be nice?" Emily thought of her mother, of Alden, of all the queens who had retreated just in time. She smiled. "Why not both? But if you have to choose, be kind." And so, while the world waited for her next big tournament, Emily waited too, for the sound of little feet running into the barn, where chess became not a crown to chase, but a field to share, a place where even pawns could grow wings, just like she did. "I chose my way to play. No one gets cast out from the board." It was the last Saturday of summer, the kind of night when even the wind holds its breath. In the fields outside Pecos, Texas, where the wild grass bowed to the dusk and the stars arrived early, Emily laid down the pieces. Not plastic, not marble, just stones she and the children had painted together. Black ones gathered near the barn, white ones taken from the dry riverbed. The board was drawn in chalk on a canvas tarp weighed down with corn husks at each corner. Around it sat 9 children, ages 6 to 11, each cradling a cold bottle of peach soda. Emily sat cross-legged at the center, holding the queen in her palm. It was a white rock with a crown drawn in pink nail polish. "Remember," she said, "the queen can go anywhere, but she doesn't always have to." The children nodded solemnly. Fireflies blinked like signals across the prairie. A breeze moved through the mesquite trees, carrying with it the faint scent of sweet hay and old rain. They began to play. The matches were messy, wild, full of sideways laughter and unexpected checkmates. The smallest girl, Lily, declared that every knight on her side had a name. One boy tried to trade a rook for a soda. Emily let them. Let the game live as it wanted to. Halfway through, she looked up. Professor Alden was standing beneath the big oak at the edge of the field, his silhouette silvered by moonlight. He didn't call out, didn't interrupt, just watched. Emily raised a hand, not to wave, just to let him know she knew he was there. He stepped forward after the games were done, after the last pawn had been tucked away into a coffee tin and the tarp rolled up with care. "You could be anywhere tonight," he said quietly. She looked at him, the smile in her eyes tired and full. "I am. I'm here." He sat beside her on the tarp, the grass prickling at his knees. "You turned down the national team," he said, not as a question. "They said I could travel the world," she answered, brushing dust from her skirt. "But I like watching Lily name her knights." He nodded slowly, hands folded like prayer over his knees. Clara would be proud. Emily looked toward the moon, full and watchful above them. "I read her letter every night. She said, if I ever saw a queen step back instead of forward, it means kindness won." Alden exhaled slowly. That's not in any chess manual. Exactly, Emily said. That's why it matters. They sat for a long time after that. No pieces, no boards, just the sounds of children catching fireflies and the wind threading itself through memory. When Alden rose to leave, he placed a folded paper on the ground beside her. "What's this?" she asked. "It's not a recommendation letter," he smiled. "It's an application, for anyone who wants to study the way you teach." She laughed. "You mean the dirt chess school under a full moon?" "Exactly that. The only school that ever taught me what a queen really means." Emily tucked the paper into her notebook. She looked out at the field, now quiet, with children dozing in sleeping bags, the soft glow of their lanterns flickering like small stars. "I chose my way to play," she whispered. "No one gets cast out from the board." And for the first time in his long life, Professor William Alden understood. Some victories don't belong in trophies. Some games are only won when you stop keeping score. And some students don't arrive through doors. They rise from the dust and change everything. Forever.